One of the most interesting features of Vue StyleGuider is it allows us to render a component within the documentation site, giving the reader a live interactive preview of that component. To get this working, we just need to declare the component in a JavaScript code block in our docs tag. So let me show you how to do that with the page footer component. So firstly, we're going to go down and add a docs tag. Then we're going to add in a heading usage example. Now this is not required, but I just think it makes it look nicer. After that, we're going to put a JS or JavaScript code block. And inside that, we're going to declare the markup, which is simply just going to be page footer like that. Let's now take a look at the page footer component in the docs site, and we can see the usage example heading, but we don't actually see the component rendered correctly. Now if we take a look in the console, we can see exactly why. So after a few warnings, we can see down here that we get this type error, cannot read property, breakpoint of undefined. Now this is because the page footer template attempts to access Vuetify's breakpoint property, and the Vuetify plugin is not present in the context of where this component is being mounted. So the challenge that we have is that most of our components have dependencies of some sort, including Vuetify, Vuex, Vuerouter, and so on. So what we'll need to do is set up a wrapper component that we can use to wrap any components being previewed in the docs. Now this wrapper component will have all the required dependencies added as global properties, therefore the preview components will have access to them. So what we're going to do is come up to the terminal and we'll kill our server, and let's now create a subfolder in the docs directory where we can put the wrapper component and other files related to the style guide. So we'll go make dir -p docs/style guide. What we're actually going to do is create a factory function that generates wrapper components. So let's create a new JavaScript module by going touch docs style guide wrapper.js. Let's now open this new wrapper file and we'll begin by exporting a function. Now this function is going to take an argument which is the render function of the component being previewed. So let's go export default function, and we're going to pass in component to that. Since this is a factory function, we need to return a component config object. So inside the function, we're going to return an object. Now let's give this component a name property, and we're going to name it wrapper. This will help us with debugging in Vue DevTools. Now finally, for this to work, this wrapper component instance must declare the preview component in its own template or render function. Let's go with the latter option and put a property render. Actually, it's a function property. We pass h as an argument, and in the body of that, we return h component. We now need to tell Vue StyleGuider to call our wrapper component factory when previewing components. So to do this, we're going to go to our style guide config, and we're going to add another property, which is render root JSX. And then what we need to do is assign to that the file that we just created. So we'll go docs style guide wrapper.js. After that, we'll need to come up and restart our server. Back in the docs site, if we look in the browser console again, you'll see that we still have all the same errors since we haven't directly dealt with the missing dependency issue yet. However, if we look in the Vue DevTools at the Components tab, you'll see that we now have our wrapper component, which includes this other anonymous component, and inside that we see our page footer component. So the first part of our solution is working. As we just saw, Vue StyleGuider already wraps the preview component in another component. That's no problem, but let's give that other component a name so that we understand what's going on when debugging. So what we're going to do is add the property name to the component, and we'll make it preview container. If we look in Vue DevTools now, we'll see a clearly named component hierarchy.